Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to my channel. In this video I'm going to make a little log cabin. I'm going to make a little house based on the log cabin piecing technique. So what you'll need is a foundation square. I've gone quite small because I want it to go in my little journal. So my journal's 5 inches, so I've gone for a 4.5 inch square. I'm going to go traditional-ish with some reddish, in other words, shocking pink sari silk, a tiny scrap for the middle. You need an inch square-ish, but I'm going to fold it in half because it's very fine and pin it into submission. And then you need some strips an inch wide for your cabin. I've gone for some of my eco prints, just, you know, a handful. Depends how big your block is, a handful. And then you'll need some dark, I've gone for black, or something for the roof of your cabin. You don't need all that, I just, you know, that was what I pulled out. And then some sort of backgroundish colour, which also, again, an inch wide strips, but you will also need some larger pieces. So I've just cut myself one strip to start with, and I've kept the other scrap. It's just some old linen in a piece, you know, till I see. So we're not going to put our centre square right in the centre. We want it down a bit to accommodate the roof. So, oh, and also some piecing thread, you know, normal sewing thread. So I'm going to mark the middle. Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm going to mark the middle instead of on the diagonal like I usually do to find the middle. I'm just going to fold it, you know, in half straight-wise. And then I can put my piece under that line, so to one side of the middle. Imagine it's just a red square, just under the line. So it sits in the bottom half, and then just eyeball that it's, you know, halfway-ish. It's Wonky Wednesday, so, you know, close enough. And I'm going to pin it because it's very tricksy. And I'm going to piece this. You could do it raw edge if you wanted to, but I just felt like piecing, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start with one whole round of my cabin coloured pieces. I'm going to trim that down because it's a bit wider than an inch. So I'm aiming, again this is all-ish, for my finished logs to be about 1/2 inch. So I've got them an inch wide minus 2/4 inch seams. So I'm going to put it on there right sides together, and I start with you know, with it oriented like this, with my square in the bottom half. I'm going to start with this piece, which is in the top half. Hope that's clear, because that's where the roof's going to go. Silk against silk, super tricksy. And I'm just going to do a little running stitch 1/4 inch seam, just by eye. The foundation square will keep us true. We can make adjustments as we go along. And like I said, it's Wonky Wednesday, so just a little running stitch along to the end and to the end of my underneath square, which is the right size, more or less. I do a back stitch to finish, and then I'm going to trim that level with the edge of my underneath square. Being careful not to cut my piecing thread. And then I'm going to flip that over, catch it on the pin, flip it up, and I'll probably need to put another pin in it because it's silk, so it won't stay pressed. If I'm piecing, I will use anything with the proviso that it's not too thick. Right, so I've done that once, and I'm going to turn it a 1/4 turn clockwise, and just get my thread over there. Sometimes I stitch myself out there, sometimes I just feel slapdash and I do it like that, and today I feel slapdash. Get another bit of my cabin-y colour. So I've got some machine stitching around the edge, but I don't think it matters, it'll be in the seam. And I'm just going to stitch that along there, again with a 1/4 inch seam. So just come up from the back. And stitch along. Stella is sleeping on the sofa behind me. She was snoring her head off a minute ago when I was getting all the stuff out. She's now stopped, but if you hear snoring again in a minute, it's Stella. I always say that because a few people have said that they've gone around the house looking for the source of the noise, you know, their own house. Obviously not my house, but it's actually Stella, who, if you don't know, is my little cockapoo, and she snores. Right, flip that up and turn and get another bit for here. Just choose a piece, Catherine, doesn't matter. Apparently it does. I've pulled these all out of the scrap, so they're all a bit hairy and bitty. So same thing again, another 1/4 inch seam. All the way along. Oh, something there. Oh, it's a pin underneath. To get that out, it's in my way. Pins are useful until they're not, and then they're in your way. Whoops. I really was insistent on using that sari silk, although it's a little bit tricky because I can't remember, a few weeks ago I showed you my rice bag that I made with the bento box blocks that we did a few weeks ago, and in that the lining of that I used this shocking pink sari silk, of which I have lots, and I just loved the contrast of the shocking pink sari with the eco print, so that's why I wanted to use it here in the middle of my little log cabin. Right, so there we go. Finger press and turn, and then my final piece, I'm going to get that pin away as well because it probably will get in the way. Do you see how my bit of pink is really rectangular? I'm going to make sure it's square with my 4th and final piece of this round by, well, I can choose a bit of cloth. That piece will do. That's that piece I picked up. By making sure that I lay this on, so I want my little red square to finish square, and you see, so I want it to finish with that much showing, so I want my seam allowance to be there, so I'm going to put that there. Hope that makes sense. You can also audition with a pin and flip up and see if it's, you know, pleasingly square, which it now is, so I'm going to stitch there. That's how I get away with being wonky. I just like my centre squares to be, you know, somewhere in the region of square. And after that I don't really care anymore. After that I'm slapdash, and the logs can be all different widths, and I don't mind as long as when I get to the outside of my foundation that I've covered the foundation. But you see there I've got like a 1/2 inch seam. I might trim some of that excess that's poking out. So that's basically one complete normal round. The only difference is we didn't do dark and light, you know, as in a conventional log cabin. You just use one colour. I guess you could do dark and light if you wanted to. So that's too small for this. I'm just going to trim a tiny bit of that away. That's better. Flip that up. So that's one round. So that's kind of the centre of my log cabin. I'm going to keep saying that because I find it amusing. I hope you don't find it irritating. Log cabin. So now I need to start my roof. So I need a little gable end for my roof. So I think the easiest way to do that, basically you need a triangle, is to just stitch on you know, a straight strip, and I'm going for this black. Again, making sure that you see, I was a bit neat with my seam allowances the first round. They weren't quite as generous as they should be, so I'm going to compensate by making them a bit more generous in this round. So I'm just going to stitch this on in the completely normal way all the way across. just with a running stitch, nothing fancy. And this will form the little gable end of our log cabin. I haven't yet decided if that's what I'm going to put on the little title screen, or if people will think that I've made a typo. Oh, I don't need to cut that, never mind. That's because I was amusing myself with my log cabin. Or if I call it a log cabin house, I don't know. And I can't ask you because by the time you see this, I'll already have done it. Right, so I just press that open in the normal way, that seam, up, out. I'll pin it just to hold it in place. I'm going to pin it right down here, almost through the seam I just sewed. Now we need to cut a triangle. So I think the easiest way is to just fold in the end, aiming to come somewhere in the middle, this middle line. Do you see the middle of your middle square? That's sort of the middle of the little house. Just like that. It doesn't matter if it's wonky, in fact it's good if it's wonky. And then just sort of crease it with your thumb, and then get your scissors and get them, and make sure you're only in the black, in my case, the roof colour, and just cut along that fold. Do you see? I was in the fold, I wasn't behind it, I was in the fold. And then we can trim some of that away as well because we don't need all that. And then I'll do the same the other side, just get my pin back a little bit. So I'm folding that to the centre to make a triangle. And then I'm getting my scissors, I'll show you. Do you see I'm inside that black fabric, I'm not behind it, I'm in the fold of the black fabric. That's super important or you will cut the wrong thing. And you just cut, I'm just going to take a slight detour so I don't cut my stitching. Do you see? So now I've got a little triangle. I'm going to trim some of that as well, just to make it neat. So there we go. So now we've got a super mini little house. So now we're going to start again going round, again with the log cabin colour, which in my case is my Eco Prints. Have some of this. So you just stitch it on. So I'm going to start here at the bottom point of this triangle, just normal, just checking my seam allowances again because I seem to be a bit all over the place today. Just making sure that I come just ever so slightly past there, just to be, on the safe side. And just stitch my 1/4 inch seam. I have to fit quite a lot of logs into this small space, that's why I'm being really careful of my seams. Because it's not like if you're just making a general log cabin, it doesn't really matter how many logs there are, you're just doing your 2 darks, 2 lights, going round and round. But for this, because I want the house shape, that's why I'm being a little bit more careful about my seam allowances and how wide a log I've got showing. There we go, so that's to the end of that seam. I can keep my thread attached. I'm going to trim it off here just straight as normal. I'm going to get this thread over to my left out of the way because I need to trim here and don't want to cut it. Flip it up, finger press it. Now all I'm going to do now is trim this in line with my roof, my gable end. I'm just going to put my scissors in line with my roof there and just cut. Do you see? And then turn it, and just normal here, just a straight log along the base of the house. I have this bit of rust and tea dyed sheet. I'm just checking again, yeah, I need to take a slightly bigger seam. And just stitch all the way along. All the way along, sorry, that's my voice on the last word. This is a little bit hard to sew through because of the rust printing, and the tea sometimes makes it, even though it's all washed, you know, and neutralised and so on, just kind of can do something to the structure of the cloth sometimes. And I'm now going to cut it with my snippy fiskers, which again can blunt them, but I'm gonna, one has to use them, there's no point in not using them, is there? Right. There we go. Turn it again, and I'm going to put another log along that side of my little house. Again, just match it up here as normal. It only needs to be as long as just past your roof. So to there would be long enough. I'm just going to leave it and trim it when I've stitched it. I didn't check my width. So you see my width needs to be about there. So you can even lay it on, fold it, put a crease in it, and then that's your stitching line. And my seam allowance needs to be a bit more generous. I think my strips are slightly wider than an inch as well. But I much prefer to not stress over measuring and being super accurate and find ways to make it work, regardless. That's just me. Like I said, I pulled all those strips out of my scraps, so I just judged that they were somewhere in the region of an inch wide. Right, so I'm to the end of my little black gable end. I'm going to end that thread off because it's too small, I think. And then don't trim it now, open it up first and then trim. If you trim it first, your angle will be wrong. So open it up, and then the same thing, you just go along in line with your gable end, only through your little strip that you just sewed on. Just line your scissors up and cut. So there we've got a super weird looking house with a little tiny roof. So now we need to do the next line of the roof. So we need to get a strip of roof coloured cloth. Now here, just to make it the effect really good, you want your stitching line to come through this point. Do you see where my finger is? Where the little gable end meets this strip. So I'm just going to do my usual pinning trick. Now this strip, I'm just going to make sure it comes slightly past, you see, just by a little pointy bit. And here it can just match up, that's fine. But I'm going to do my pinning thing, well mine, you know, it's not mine. I'm going to go through, whoopsie, come on, open up nicely. I'm going to make sure I go through that point where I want to stitch. Do you see where I mean? That little point there, that junction with my pin. And then make sure my pin is straight, going straight through the cloth. And I'm holding it. And then I'll take another pin and line it up with that pin, and then I know that's the line I have to stitch along to get through that point. And I'll put another pin the other side as well. I think we did this last week with the pieced heart, the patchwork heart. So if I stitch, and then I can take that straight pin out, knowing that now if I stitch somewhere along that line, that's my super short bit of thread, then I'll be through that point. We hope. That's the theory. So I'm not going to stitch out here because I'll trim that off in a minute. I'm going to start stitching so I'm through this log as well. I'll get the pin out now, I'm in the right place. Looks quite thick, that bit of sheet there. I can get through there. Don't know if I can get through here where the seam is. Yes, I can. Can I? Yeah. If needles won't go through, I don't push, I wiggle. If you go pushing, especially when you don't wear a thimble, which I don't, choose not to, you're in danger of it going up your fingernail or something painful like that. So I'm just going to stitch until I come to the end of my roof triangle. What do we call it? A gable end. So I just think I need a little back stitch and slightly forward, and I'm there. And then flip that up. Now this one, keep your piecing thread out of the way, gets trimmed in line with the side of your house here, just in a straight line, like that. And then get your piecing thread out of the way again. And then you need to trim it along this line. So it's pretty logical compared to the scrappy slow stitch heart we did a couple of weeks ago, where the trimming was, you know, a bit opposite what we were looking at, kind of thing. That makes sense. You know what I mean? Here you're basically trimming things in line once you've got that little triangle. So hopefully it's straightforward. So now I need to do the other side of my roof. It's the same thing again. I'm just going to match it up to those two edges and make sure I pin it. I've just come slightly past here only really because I've got a weird end that needs trimming. In fact, maybe I'll trim that first. And I can just lay it on there, match it here, do my pinny through that point. Pinny, come out the way. So I'm just putting it in somewhere where the seam allowance should be, and then I'm putting the pin directly, can you see, directly into that junction, straight through. You put it straight through because then it holds the two pieces of cloth aligned. If you now turn it, they'll shift, and that's not what you want. There are some things that I like to not be wonky. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm pinning these pins in line with that. That's a bent pin, that's not going to ever be in line with anything. In line with that pin that I've put through to mark that point. Come on, there we go. And then I can get that out. I might put it back in. It's best to get it out and put it back in, because then you don't shift. If you just turn it, then you'll shift everything. Right, so I'll stitch along that line. Get that first pin out now. And that is the second round. Get that pin out. It's a bit thick there. Now I've come off my line. I've come off my line. What I'm going to do is be super naughty and just jump back. Go back where I came from, because I'm not pulling it out. Not gonna. And then just do a back stitch, and that'll be fine. It's in the seam allowance. Whoopsie. And then go forward again on the correct line. What the eye doesn't see, the slapdash stitch it gets away with. And it'll all be hidden in the seam. So I'm just going along again until I get to the... This needle is not great. It's not the right needle. Piecing. Too thick. Back to the till I've got to the end of what's underneath. And then I'm going to flip that up. Keep my thread to my right while I trim the left. And then trim in line with the side of my house. And then I'll get my thread to the other way, and then just trim here. It hardly really needs trimming. It's just a tiny bit. There we go. So that's it for the house. Now I need to start doing the background colour. So I've done 2 rounds for my house, and now I'm going to start doing my background colour, which is going to be this cream linen. I'm going to do it all the same. So I'll get all my house cloths out of the way, but I still need my roof. So I'm just going to start again down this side, and I'm going to do, as before, just come slightly past the end of the line of the roof. Check that I've got my lugs about right. Come up from the back and stitch that on. What's the matter with you, Stels? Woken up. She's milling about. So I'm just going to sew 3 rounds using my cream background colour, and then I'll come back. Okay, so I've done my 3 rounds of cream, or 3 logs I should say, of cream. So now I'm going to trim them again in line with my roof, pull my piecing thread down out of the way, and cutting only the cream background, just under that angle. And there. And then I'm going to do another roof, another 2 lines of roof. So with my black, just match it up, slightly overlap it here, make sure it's at least long enough to reach there. That's fine. I don't think the slightly overlapping is actually necessary, it's just, I'd rather it was slightly too long than slightly too short. So I'm going to do the roof exactly how I did the first round, sew the 2 strips on, and then trim them in line with the sides of the cabin. Okay, so I've done my 2 lines of roof. I've trimmed these in line with the sides. I'm just going to trim this in line with this strip. Now I need to do 1 more round of background, where you could either do 1 more round, and then here just keep adding strips until you cover, or you could add some bigger pieces here to fill these. So I think I'm going to add 1 more round here of strips, just in the normal way. So here, well there I'm already to the edge, so maybe just down both sides, and then I'll come back and show you how to judge if you want to do a bigger piece for there. Okay, so I've done 1 more piece of the background colour here. I did go then along the bottom and up the side. So there's now 2 logs of the cream here, here and here. And I'm also going to put a cream log here and here. Just with the normal inch wide strip. Sort of salvage on there, I'm just trimming that off. So just exactly the same as before. So I'm going to do a cream strip there, and then 1 down each side. No more is necessary across the bottom. So the 2 roof lines and 1 down either side. Yours may be different depending on how accurate or wonky you've been. But anyway, I'll go away and do that, and then I'll come back and show you how to deal with the corners. Okay, I've done that, so I've now got 3 logs either side of my little house and 2 logs at the bottom and 1 log following the roof line. So now to fill in these corners, you could either then just do, you know, 2 more strips if you wanted to, if you had loads of strips, so just sew that one on, you know, 2 or 3 or however many, or you could do a super wide strip just to finish the corner. If you do that, you need to finish your sides first. because if you finish the corner with a triangle and then put the side piece on, you see your raw edge is going to be sitting on top of the triangle. Okay, so in order to gauge how wide a strip you need for this corner, I just get a bit of cloth, and I know I want it to be at least this wide plus a seam allowance, if you envisage a strip shown on here. So I'm just going to make sure it's super duper wide, cut it and then trim it afterwards. So I'm going to do it about 1 inch wider than I think, because I don't mind making scraps. You know, they'll go in the scraps, they'll get used. It's old cloth. I just think it's easier. So now if I stitch that there like that, and then flip it up, you see I've got plenty to get to the end of my block. In fact, I say I've got plenty, I've got just enough. Just enough. So I'm just going to stitch a normal seam allowance. But if you wanted to measure, basically you'd measure from that point down to where your seam's going to be, and then you'd add a seam allowance, and then add a bit extra for security's sake. Because when you fold the cloth over as well, some width is lost in the fold, or is used up in the fold. So I'm just going to stitch all the way along to the other side. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing across the other corner. But like I said, you could equally just keep working in your strips until you'd covered your foundation. Cloth, whichever you prefer, is an option. I don't need to. So again, I don't need to cut my thread. So again, fold it back before you trim, otherwise the angles will or may be wrong. Now this is quite thin cloth, so I can see through. If you couldn't, you can turn it over to the wrong side. And of course, if you're a rotary cutterer, you can do all that. I'm just going to do it with my snippy fiskers. One bit. 2 bits. Don't cut your piecing thread. Oh, I nearly did. Just stop myself in time. There we go. It's not the end of the world if you cut your piecing thread. But it's a bit annoying. Right, so there I've got this corner piece. Do you see? So now I need to just do the same on the other corner. I'm just going to make sure I'm well past, because judging angles and then flipping them, I've never been good at that. You know, because when you turn it, the angles go the other way. Bit of something blue stuck on there. So I'm just going to stitch along here. I hope you like the, I did like this little, whatever we're calling it. Is it a little house? Is it a birdhouse? For a while I thought maybe it was a birdhouse, but then I think a birdhouse should have a circle for a door, not a square. So what I guess you could do is you could make it a bit bigger, you know, scale the whole thing up so that your centre square was a reasonable size, and then I would make the centre square from the same cloth as the cabin itself, and then I would applique a circle of, you know, maybe a dark colour to indicate a doorway, a black or dark brown. I would applique a circle into that square. And then I think you could get away with calling it a birdhouse. But I think I'm sticking with log cabin, just because, as you can tell, it amuses me. Right, so that's the end of the piecing thread. Don't need that anymore. Flip it up, finger press it, turn it over, trim it. Now I think the only thing I'm going to do, I mean, you can of course go to town on the stitching if you like. Sorry, that was just a bit awkward, my arm coming across like that. I think the only thing I'm going to do is just stitch it around the edge. Trim it slightly better than that, the shifty linen. I'm going to stitch just all around the edge to stop it, stop the edges flipping around, with the exception of this edge, which you've guessed it, I'm going to sew it into my journal. So I'm going to start here and go there, there and there, just with a running stitch. And this is just because I'm putting it in my journal. If you wanted to make it into something and you were going to sew something else to it, obviously you wouldn't need to do this. But I think it's super cute. A cute little house. I hope it's pretty straightforward. I hope it's easy for you to see how you would translate that into raw edge if you wanted to. You just do it in exactly the same way, only lay the strips on and stitch them down as we've been doing in the other raw edge ones. And cutting the angles the same way. You could of course scale the whole size of the side of the house up, not only by having bigger logs, bigger foundation block, doing a round centre like I said to make it a birdie house. You could do more roof lines, you know. It's just the general principle is that you make your little house. You could do more lines, more rounds here before you put your triangle, but once you've decided on your first number of rounds, however many rounds you're going to do, you do your triangle, and then you start cutting your angles to match your roof lines. And then once you've got your first roof line is followed by the logs that are the house or cabin colour, and then you could do as many like that as you wanted, and then your last roof line has the background colour, so that you've got this overhang. Do you see? Do you see? So I'm sure you could take all those principles and make bigger ones if you wanted to, by adding more logs or making the logs wider, or, you know, multiple variations. So I hope you like it anyway. I liked it. I like it. I haven't trimmed it very straight. Oh dear, when I stitched it I might give it another trim. And Stella's snoring again. It's nearly tea time here, so when I've done this I shall take her for a little walk around the woods, and it's just me and her and Fred at home, so then we can both have our tea, and I might catch up on some stitching this evening and watching some videos that I have to catch up on. Well, I don't have to, but I want to, of the lovely YouTube people that I watch. So one more line and then it can go in the journal. I'm very pleased I went with the sari silk in the middle. I think that really just lifts it. I think birdhouses generally, don't they have a little perch, don't they? I was just trying to work out how you might simulate the perch in 2 dimensions. I don't know. I can't think. You could also do a little chimney, you know, you could embellish it more, make it more house-like by embroidery and so on. You could applique a chimney on. You could make it more rectangular with 2 red things, or, you know, red things, you know, red squares. I don't know how you'd do that. I have to give that some thought. And a door. Probably by piecing strips before you put them on in the relevant place. But anyway, you could do all that. But I'm not going to start doing that now because this video is already quite long. I'm going to get my journal. It's got bits of scrap on it. And put it in there. So that is my little log cabin. I didn't have anything in there last week because we did the pieced heart, which I turned into a thing that was too big. There we go. So the last one was the scrappy slow stitch heart. And this one's getting stitched to some paper. Oh, I was just going to trim it a bit more, wasn't I? I nearly forgot. Just that little bit there, I think. That's all that's required. There we go. The right way around, Catherine. So I'm just going to stitch it through the paper along that side. And I have no clue what I'm going to do next week. Often I do have an idea a week or two in advance, but for next week I haven't. But I will come up with something. I don't think we're done with log cabins yet, but at one point we might go into other... I want to keep this kind of about piecing or raw edging or whatever, but sort of quilt based, but not done in the traditional quilty way, you know, the precise and measuring and all that. So sort of quilting, but wonky quilting. But at the moment I think there's still some mileage in the log cabins. And it's also possible that I'll go into other quilty things and then come back to log cabins. So that's what's coming up. There seems to be quite a few of you that follow regularly this series, who also follow the Monday series. I wonder if there's any of you that follow this and not the Monday. I wouldn't mind if you are someone who follows Wonky Wednesday but not the Mondays. Then I wouldn't mind if you just, you know, popped a comment, because that would be interesting to know. Because I know that the Mondays get a lot more views than these Wednesday videos. So I think there's more people following the Mondays than the Wednesdays. But yeah, just, you know, I was just interested to have your feedback. I can't ask people that don't watch this now because they won't be watching why they don't. I know you can't do everything. But there we go. There's my little wonky log cabin. Wonky log cabin. There we go. I can't speak anymore. It's late in the day. There we go. So I hope you like that. I hope you have fun with it if you make one or several, or expand on it, or, you know, make it your own in some way. But I like it. It's cute. And thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to joining me next time for more cloth tales. Bye bye.